Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. My background is, I think, similar to a lot of other entrepreneurs and people who have who've built something from nothing. There's that story that we hear all the time. There's people that you probably follow, that I follow, like some of the big players, like Grant Cardone and Ed Milet. Those guys, we hear that we
Right.
all can relate to the same story, and I kind of took that same path. So if you look at me and say, who am I? I am a guy that we can work backwards and look at who I am today and look at where we've gotten, and certainly there's more to go. But I'm a guy who grew up very poor. When I was 12, my father had passed away, relatively suddenly over a few months. It was kind of like, hey, this is what's happening, and that was that. And so, you add to that I grew up in a fairly, dysfunctional household after that. I find that tends to be, excuse me, the recipe for potentially creating a really successful business person. So I did have that childhood where if I wanted something, I needed to make it happen. Nobody was giving me anything, and so I learned really, really early on that I needed to make something happen if I wanted something to happen. And that could mean anything. It was like in any way. If I wanted to go to the movies when I was 13 years old, I had to go find a way to make money to be able to pay for the movies because we're living off of Social Security. Right? So it's common. I think everybody has their own sort of version of that story, but it did shape where I am today and how I got here and how I was able to do it. Words like grit and discipline and dedication and just focus, like these are, like, I can say them now, but at 12, 13, 14 years old, teenager, you don't even know like the words exist. You kind of forge, and just kind of do what feels right.
So instinct kind of takes over at that point.
Yeah, it's totally instinct, and so just growing up in a way that anything that I wanted, I had to find a way to get it, like I said, perseverance and grit. I'll tell you the thing that relates to today that I learned back then is you have to work harder than everybody else. So that's also, a big part of my background, and who I am. I was never the smartest person in the room, admittedly, although I felt like it sometimes. I worked harder than everybody else. And I didn't know that was so important in life, but in Mindcore today, that's how Mindcore became Mindcore. And we'll talk about that, but it's that story that so many successful entrepreneurs share. And look, there's entrepreneurs that make it that went to Wharton, and grew up in the Hamptons. But that wasn't my background, And so I kind of like to say that even though I do have book smarts, it was the street smarts and that tough early part of my life that went into my 20s that actually made it possible for me to be in Mindcore and be what I am today, which is a coach to all of my employees, a mentor to a lot of other people, and to have had all the failures along the way. I do have a formal education. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I wanted to be a police officer. That didn't happen, obviously. I have an MBA, which I got in my 30s, and so I have all that. I didn't take a traditional path. I took a very, very roundabout path because when you grow up the way that I said, you can imagine, you don't have that typical, like, okay, go to high school, go to college for 4 years. It took me 10 years to graduate from my undergraduate degree. I worked 14 hours a day at one point driving a truck.